is my pleasure to be moderating this panel today, both with some folks that I admire, some new folks that I met today, as well as some folks who are friends of mine. So why don't we all just share again our names, what we do, and just a little bit of a background before we start. Go ahead, Vasiliki.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I'm Vasiliki Kansari, co-founder of Ink Stories. My background was not originally in games, but I come from the world of visual anthropology and documentary filmmaking. And it was when I met my partner Naveed, who was coming from Rockstar Games as the cinematic director, head of production for GTA 3 franchise onward, that we started Ink Stories. And the idea behind Ink Stories was how do we bring bold storytelling like documentaries tell to the world of games, to wide commercial audiences. So we work sort of across platforms from XR, video games, work as interactive designers. We're a whole nuts to bolts studio where we also publish our own work.
Thank you again. I'm Justin Guillo. I am the Senior Manager of Talent Sourcing at Take-Two Interactive, which also includes for 2K and Zynga. I've been in the games industry for 10 years in talent acquisition. Previously, I was just doing agency recruiting, and one thing that I've learned over the years is there's so many things outside of making the games that go to getting it in the player's hands. And if you're creative, that's a huge piece, but if you're a recruiter, in my case, you can also be in this industry if you're passionate about the work.
Hi everyone, really pleased to be here. So I'm Dr. Mithu Kandekar. So I have been doing various things around games for the last 20 years almost. So I'm a professor of game design at NYU Game Center, where I've been on faculty for over a decade now. More recently, I took up the mantle of being the director of the NYU Game Design Future Lab, which is an incubator which is designed to help NYC-based game companies, creative tech studios become more sustainable and build sort of durable, lasting companies. But I very much started, in the kind of academic side of games, but also, just like making games on the side. I have a doctorate in designing games for XR, which I did about, years ago now, and I also have a background in sort of what I like to think of as OG games and AI. So AI before this current wave of sort of generative AI. I actually had an AI for games tools company from 2016 to 2019. It got acquired, ended up getting acquired by Twitch in 2022 after I left. But before what I'm doing now, immediately before this, I was CEO and co-founder of a company called Glow Up Games. So we were explicitly dedicated to building games to center and celebrate Black and brown voices. We did the official tie-in game for the TV show Insecure, various other things. But then, sadly, we had to close our doors in the sort of current climate, which I'm sure we'll sort of get to as well. But yeah, so now I'm putting my energy into, helping other game founders, and also I do game design consulting on the side.
Hey everyone, I'm Evan. I am next to some very accomplished people here. I am much closer to you guys than I am to them. I have a studio, 5XP. We are making this game called The Coldest Winter. Pretty ambitious project, I think. Simulates the sensation of real-world decision-making under stress. We'll probably get to it maybe later. If not, then we'll find plenty of it on Instagram or something. I struggle a lot. I maybe have some stickers and some plaques to say I did a good job, but I don't have any institutions or a lot of experience in organizations, just scrapping it up, building a game. So that's, you want to know about that, I got you.
Yes. Well, Evan's really humble because The Coldest Winter actually won the GDC pitch in 2025. So the game was pretty good, enough to garner attention from GDC and actually win a competition. So congratulations again on that, because that's a huge accomplishment. Okay, awesome. So to start off first, let's just lay down the groundwork of what makes a game immersive? So this is really honestly one of those questions like, is game art? We could probably spend hours on this. But in your opinion, because every creative's opinion can differ a little bit, in your mind, what does make a game immersive? Would you like to start with Lee?
Yeah, sure. It's funny because this is a really sort of appropriate question. So one of the projects that we've been developing recently is we're making it with the Royal Shakespeare Company out of the UK, and it's an adaptation of Macbeth as a game set in contemporary Iran. Okay, told as like a screen life thriller through various surveillance mechanisms. And so we created this demo of this game and we submitted it. So we work sort of intersectionally across XR and immersive spaces. And so we submitted it to Cannes last year, it was their second year of their immersive showing in competition. And so they said, this is amazing, we love it, but is it immersive? And so, or how can I describe it to the other people as being immersive? And so in different, I guess, just to start off, this sort of like larger umbrella of what is immersive is also conditional. And I think it depends, because when you're talking about like in the gallery space, in the art space, and you're talking about like XR film festivals, like they maybe have different conditions for what they consider immersive. And to really rally in that world, we built an installation around it, and we created, because depending on how you play, there were different endings, and then we created an AI, designed this AI language model that participants would get their own prophecy depending on how they played. So we added these extra immersive entities, but I believe that the way we define immersive is if you as the audience are integral to the storytelling or the story making, then it is immersive. If it cannot exist without your presence, then it's immersive. So I think that's really the sort of
The groundwork, yeah. For sure.
Groundwork.
I mean, I definitely agree. Me too. Did you
Yeah,
wanna
I
add
love
to
this question because when I teach about games, I actually ban like using the word immersion because usually when you say immersion, there is like a whole host of things you could mean, right? Like, do you mean, is it something that like draws your attention and keeps your attention, right? And in fact, attention is sometimes an interesting word to use. There's a great talk a few years back now at Game Developers Conference that you can look up online by game designer Richard LaMarchand, which was called Attention, Not Immersion, right? Because sometimes it's just like, oh, this story keeps my interest, or, I really, these controls particularly made me feel like I was embodying the actions, right, that the character is also taking. So I think immersive and immersion, I think are less useful terms almost. And it's interesting because in my, and I say this as someone who, did my doctorate, like I said, on looking at sort of games and XR, but part of that, I sort of looked at the entire history of art and the way that the sort of relationship between like art and immersion, like this so-called idea of immersion, has always been this sort of interesting thing that's gone back and forth. Sometimes we think of we want to not be able to differentiate ourselves from this art that we're receiving, and other times we want to be able to sort of sit back from it and go, yes, interesting, but I'm a separate thing from it. But it's interesting. My colleague at NYU, Eric Zimmerman, he wrote this book 20 years ago, but he has this concept of the immersive fallacy. And similarly, it's this idea that this mistaken idea that folks have often in marketing, etc., that the thing that's most valuable about games that we should care about is immersion, or this idea of immersion. And we see that come up again and again. And the reason I bring it up is because, who's seen that meme? NVIDIA announced that whole DLSS phase. Who's seen the memes around that? Whereas some hilarious memes, right? Because it's this idea of you have this game character, and then suddenly they look really realistic. But that's a great sort of illustration of the immersive fallacy, because it's like the thing that makes these characters or games interesting is not how like photorealistic these characters look, right? It's like something else about the game.
Right,
So anyway,
absolutely.
yes,
No,
my whole
this
rant
is-
about immersion.
It's fantastic. Yeah. Justin, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so I haven't made a single game, but I've talked to thousands of people who have, and I think the one thing that I've learned is you're totally right. It's not, immersion is commonly used, but I think it's, as a player and as a person, again, who doesn't make them, and when talking to engineers and animators and everybody in between, it's, their biggest goal is how does it feel to the player, right? And I think
Absolutely.
feel is what pulls you across
Absolutely.
that draws immersion, not in my opinion, of course, not necessarily, oh, am I in it? No, does it feel right? If you're playing a shooter game, does it feel right? You know, people who go to the gun range and stuff in real life, their most common thing with shooter games is what? It doesn't feel right. You know, you play games that have really good feel, and then you're there for 3-4 hours and the time starts to evaporate. And that to me is immersion, right? When it feels like it should, not necessarily am I, you know, as they're both saying, immersed in this environment or this place.
So, like, do you want to add anything to that, Evan, before we move on?
Yeah, I think that when we look at the definition of immersion, right, it's about being engaged, being involved, being like part of the experience that was brought up earlier. I think it's important to remember about immersion is that we have to, like, when we're considering like what the experience is about being immersion, we have to consider like I'm sorry, it's a lot of words. We're sorry, I think I'm just like lost.
No worries.
Yeah.
Evan. No worries. I can get back to you
Yeah.
if you'd like.
Is
That's
it
not a problem.
presence? Is that what you're talking about?
Okay. I think it has a lot to do with when we're playing a game and we're not paying attention to anything else and we're like locked in, right? I think that is right there the immersion, right? The ability to lose focus on anything else but the experience itself. And so when we're designing, we have to consider like all of the things that steal our attention, right? So like the music and the visuals and the narrative and the core experience and the game loop, we're really paying attention to like how this stuff, like how many elements we're competing with and how many of that we can kind of capture in the experience. And so I feel like with immersion, we really need to, I don't know, it's a battle of fighting for attention.
Yeah, and I love the way that you're talking about it, because you're sort of mentioning like the affordances as game designers that you would design into a game to think about like how does this game sort of come together as this cohesive piece. Like, so it's like a technical skill, right? You're designing for attention and engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And you brought up flow. I heard you say
Yes.
that. If you want to
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah, it's flow, and I think that's presence, right? It's like when you're designing something, is like how do you allow someone presence to be in that space and to feel like they're. But what I wanted to say is that immersive isn't exclusive to games or XR. Like, I don't know if any of you saw the movie Sirat. Have you seen it? If you haven't, it's going to be in the theater, I don't know, for like a really short amount of time. But it is a movie that puts you out into the desert of Morocco, into the rave scene. And it is one of the most immersive experiences you can have, because it's using these conventions that allow, it puts your body feels sort of present in that space, in the storytelling and the story making.
I thought it was going to go in the other direction, saying yes, because books are also immersive. You
Yeah.
can get like
Totally.
swept up and lost in you know, a
Absolutely.
story and lose all sense of time, etc. So every media has its own like set of affordances.
Right, absolutely. And I think also that folks do forget, because some of us were trained in game design, like myself. I studied game design, and there is game theory that goes around this, of this theory of immersion. And like Vasiliki mentioned, the state of flow, that is definitely something that we utilize in game theory to design certain games where we do want the player to feel lost and immerse to the point where you lose a sense of time and you want to get into this game loop and continue what you're doing. So it is by design that we are doing this, and when it's done very well and intentionally. that's when we can have really powerful experiences that we can gravitate towards. So thank you so much for all your answers. I would love to move on to a question that I find very, very interesting. Some of you like teeter-totter between traditional media and like new media, right? Games and filmmaking. So what are some affordances that games can give you that perhaps otherwise traditional media wouldn't be able to when you're dealing with things like XR and VR and AR?
So is XR, AR, VR versus traditional games?
Yeah, or traditional media,
Okay.
like filmmaking and storytelling from like, let's say comparing 40, 50 years ago to now.
Right. Well, what's super interesting, and this was part of our initial inspiration in starting the studio, coming from like a documentary film background where you have the process and the methodology of making documentaries of like so much research, and so what you're really seeing captured up on the screen is just like a small fraction of all the materials that went into informing that one piece. And what's so incredible and powerful about games and XR is that it is nonlinear in a way that you can include an experience that can go as deep as it needs to be. And so you can sort of, you can craft an experience that is for these different types of gamers or people that are like completionists that want to go through every piece of material, want to like look through every photograph that was the inspiration photo, or do like a total vertical deep dive. And so it really allows for sort of this like ecosystem of the story world where you can go off in various tangents and almost represent a much more dynamic perspective of a story, as opposed to just like main characters, linear narrative path, and you're not seeing anything outside of that traditional frame.
What you said earlier, when you mentioned in the previous question about the engagement between player and like designer and the team, basically, that right there is the core difference to me between any of the traditional medias versus gaming. The fact that it requires players to engage with it, right? That is unique to our field, is that like players cannot, I mean, like you put on a film, I hit play on a film right now, it just goes. Same with music, whatever. But a game, you hit play, it doesn't go. Like you have to engage with it. You must like participate in this experience. And it's almost like a dance between designer and player, where it's like what part, the player does this crazy thing and then the designer intended for that, but then there's a lot of experiences that players will come up with that the designers did not have in mind. And it's just like this collaborative element that's just like beautiful. I love this about games, and it's just a mastery of all disciplines too, games. It's like, music and film and fashion and chemistry and science and like gravity, and all these elements that go into developing a game, and it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, there's a concept in games games and game design called agency. So players have like agency in what they're doing, and that is the thing that sets games apart for sure. And yeah, I think like everyone's talking about, that is a sort of designed aspect of the game. So yeah, I think in short, it is like agency that players have, whether it's whether that's mediated by like the latest technology, whether there's like generative AI storylines, for instance, or whatever. Like there's different kinds of agency that players have.
Yeah, absolutely. We always talk about too in games that games are so participatory. It requires, like Evan said, it requires input. It requires you to do something, versus in traditional media where you are just an audience, right? You're just waiting for something to unravel and seeing things happen. But same thing with books too, because it requires you to read and unravel. So even though it's traditional media, there's still elements of things that we can pull from that are part of games. So I would love to move on to another question, specifically about education. When it comes to students, what are the unique challenges that some students in today would find in trying to enter the games industry and the current environment that we're all kind of working with? Does anybody want to
I feel
start
like
with
as
that?
a talent
Yeah,
acquisition
absolutely.
person, you should answer
Yeah,
from your perspective.
I looked
perspective.
around because I
Yes.
was trying to defer, but no. I think I think just like anything, it's like I said, there's gathering experience, whether it be directly where you want to be now or for what you want to do in the future, I think is the important piece, right? So even if you're in a position where there's not a lot of an abundance, but are you downloading Unreal Engine on your side? Are you tinkering? Are you projecting? That's kind of the main piece that we look for, even when we're hiring for undergrads or graduate programs and things of that nature, is side projects, right? Are you staying busy? Are you continuing to push the envelope of what you're capable of? And more importantly, if you're doing one thing, do you understand its ramifications on the people you'll be working with, right? Because that is the big difference from a small group project built with a couple people trying to go into a larger studio or a larger organization is it's 5 devs to 50 or 60 just in your department. And how does your work impact, are you going to put an asset that all of a sudden is the most computationally heavy thing and now the game runs at a crawl, right?
Right, absolutely.
So really understanding how what you do impacts and can influence and positively those around you as well.
And Jessica, we piggyback off of that too, because there's such a huge emphasis on portfolios, right, when you are starting in the industry. And maybe there are some folks here who don't even have that, and they don't have enough experience to maybe put up a portfolio. So what would be your suggestions when it comes to gathering work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the thing that I've learned over the years in reviewing a bunch of portfolios is that we really want to see how you got to the end point, right? The final product is great, and that's one of the fallacies that we fall into is like, I'm only going to show my best stuff. We want to see the screen recording. We want to see you go start to finish. Show us the web page you're looking at where that has the reference art, right? And then time lapse it to show how you got from the reference art all the way to the completed in-engine asset, right? And I think that's the part that's most important because it's not exactly what you can produce. It's, again, how you produce it, how quickly you can produce it, the fidelity in which it, like if you have the nicest rock in your portfolio, but it took you 6 months, that's not really that's not the best use of your portfolio space.
Right, absolutely. I also would want to add, if anybody would like to add to this too, this idea that showing process and progress is better than the end point. Would anybody like to touch on that specifically for portfolio work?
So I graduated like 12 years ago from school, and it was rough. Like it was really rough. Trying to get out in the industry there, and I don't envy you by any means. But I will say that what you have at your advantage here is that you have all of our mess ups and all of our experiences to look back on, and you can kind of pull that from social media. And then you also have your peers too, which are like really awesome. Everyone's like connected nowadays, and you can like learn from one another. There's so much to learn on YouTube. And so I think the challenge is going to be standing out. And I think that the real important part of standing out is offering something that is unique to you, right? Unique to the world. Like, what are you offering yourself for, And I think that now there's so much, everyone's just trying to like blend in and fall into trends that it gets harder to like find you. But the sooner you do, the better you have at like putting yourself in a position where people can discover that, discover yourself. And thankfully, we have like a lot of areas for that, for discovery. But I think it's harder now because so many people are on it. So.
Yeah, I think that's. I think to answer the portfolio thing specifically and the idea of showing process, like I completely agree with that. The other thing I'll add as well, because I think like what goes in your portfolio is very different depending on like what discipline of games, what kinds of roles you're trying to get into. Your portfolio is going to look different if you're looking to get into like being a narrative designer versus being like a systems designer versus being a programmer. So but I think having work that is that has a perspective. I think that's what's interesting, right? Like, and I think that ties to what you were saying about like standing out. Like, I think showing that you're someone who is coming to the space with like a perspective is important. The other thing I'll say about the portfolio piece, it's interesting because when we admit game design students to the NYU Game Center, we do ask for like a portfolio, right? Like when you're coming in, and yes, a lot of people these days do submit game work, but what is always super interesting to us is like other creative work, right? Like, you know, maybe you're like someone who's like written a play, or maybe you're someone who's like really interested in photography or whatever. It's showing that you're someone who is like creative, you take your craft, whatever that craft is, really seriously, and that, you know how to talk about that craft as well.
Yeah, I think that's super important, just to double down on that. I mean, my partner Naveen and I, we did this master's class at Princeton, and we've done several, and so often it's really surprising to see, you see these like computer science kids that are in these classes, and they're absolutely brilliant, but when they're tasked to sort of think outside of that lane, there is like a profound deficit in this ability to like really think about these other creative departments. And we're in a space where interdisciplinary sort of artistic voice is so important. It's like, don't just, and yeah, if you're like really good at making the rock and you're like, forget it, I'm just gonna be the rock guy, then like go for that. But at the same time, really, really make sure that you yourself are like engaging and consuming all sorts of art forms that could co-inspire you. And then craft and really, really find your artistic voice. Like, I can't remember who it was that said on a panel once that it's like, it's better that you're turned down by 10 possible employers, but you find that one that is like really jiving with what you're doing, because at the end of the day, you don't want to find yourself in this heap of like these sort of generic portfolios or generic letters. Like, and if you find that passion and then that one project is right for you, then that's like a magic fit. So really encourage this, like, and I think we're in a moment in time across creative industries that are going through their own crises, but creativity will always be rewarded.
Yeah, if you want to be the rock guy, commit to the bit,
Yeah.
like make a lot of rocks, take pictures of rocks,
That's
just
Yes.
just commit.
I think that you hit the nail on the head with that. A recent hire we had for one of our studios was an expert lighting artist, was under NDAs and couldn't showcase a lot of his current work, but had a lot of personal photography there and then past work. And I was like, and then took his photography and was trying to light the same scene inside the engine just to fill his portfolio in the meantime while he was under confidentiality stuff. And I was like, well, this is something, to your exact point, like kind of showcase, again, the how you got there, the what you draw inspiration from. Do you have a whole folder of rocks on your desktop,
Yeah, and then I really want to hone in on that too, because in the industry, there's two kind of avenues you can take, right? There's the AAA side with all the big blockbuster games where you are essentially asked to become an expert in a thing. So you could definitely be the rock guy for your entire career, and that's what you are known for. But then there's the independent developer side where you are encouraged to be a generalist and wear as many hats as possible because money is tight. So you get to learn all the things so you can be an asset to your team. So Justin, since you have had experience with AAA, can you give students here a little bit of insight on that special versus independent kind of avenue?
I think understanding a broad scope is probably early is a lot more beneficial, right? You want to take a wide breadth before you take a deep dive, right? And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier about what you're positioning yourself for. Condense your portfolio, send it for the specific role. Send only your rocks to the hard surface position, right? If that's what you're looking at. But don't send them the lighting work. But should you know lighting? Yes, if you're at that point in your career where you're still exposed to different avenues and you haven't fully decided of what you're going to specialize in, or if you even need a specialist. We hire generalists all the time in a lot of these areas as well, animation being one of them. So again, if you're rigging all the time and you're animating, find a way to learn how that affects one another, because I think, as mentioned in AAA, that's the biggest thing for us, is not just the work you do, but the downstream effects of that work. Am I building systems, tools, If I'm the rigger, am I building the rigs that everybody can use, that we can go from 2 legs to 4 legs really easily? All of those things, right? And really making it so, you know, you're not the rock guy, you're the, ooh, we like the product that comes from that person, because they know that it's going to be easy to work with, easy to bring into the game, all of those things.
Absolutely. Me too. Do you want to add to that? I saw you nodding a little bit there.
Oh no, I was just agreeing.
You're
Yeah,
agreeing.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So I'm going to start with a few more personalized questions, if that's okay. So Evan, what would you say are the most critical non-technical skills, being an indie developer, right, and leading a team? Some non-technical skills that are needed to be successful when launching a game and working on it with other people.
Well, there's a lot of them, but communication is one of the really strong ones I suggest, is being able to communicate what you have in here so it can come out here properly, right? Mm-hmm. So don't fumble like I was doing earlier. You want to be able to like, everyone has their different learning. Everyone has their ability to like understand differently. Some people are like hands-on learners. Some people are like they just have to see it in documentation. Being able to recognize that with your team, recognize that with your peers, recognize that anyone you want to communicate your idea with, that's going to be like one of the strongest parts, right? Is just being able to tell them like how you need things done, how you want things done, the timeline of that, like the method, everything. Being able to communicate that is going to be like one of the most useful things you can do, you know? And so if you don't have a lot of experience communicating, talk to yourself in the mirror. Like, you know, just go to a coffee shop and say something really complicated, like ask for a complicated order, but being able to like to explain that in like the shortest way possible, you know, just practice doing that, because it's going to be really critical for working on teams, trying to, you know, or trying to advocate your ideas or plans. Just communication. That's going to be like the biggest one for me.
Absolutely. I feel like people underestimate too, like the power of communication when you're working on a team. It's like creatives are like chefs. So you have like 10 chefs in a kitchen and everybody wants to tell you how the recipe should go. It's really, really hard. Absolutely. And me too, since becoming like the new director of the game design lab at NYU, you have worked with AR and VR and traditional AI. Now there's conversations being talked about generative AI. So the question that I have for you is, which emerging technologies do you believe are like the future inside the games industry in the next 5 years?
Oh, I get the spicy Gen AI tools question. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, you know, we could have a whole panel about that, of course. But no, it's interesting. And I'll answer this from the perspective of like, you know, an educator, a game design educator, and as someone who like, you know, I freelance in like different studios and work with different studios. But, you know, and someone who in my own practice, listen, like, you go to like Google Gemini now and you say like, hey, you know, make me a mobile XR game which does this, this, and this, and it'll do it, and you can like run it on your device, and it's like you just prompt this thing out, and it's wild because for you know, if you're a game designer, you know, previously you might have needed to like, you know, spend a couple of days prototyping something or even longer, and now you can sort of just like, you know, prototype, like vibe code prototypes out, and you know, it's wild like how much it's changed like a lot of people's processes, including my own sometimes, you know, and it's very much a workflow which is used in like a few like small to mid-sized studios that I've worked with. It's interesting though, because, you know, one of the things I reflect on always is I can, you know, there's all kinds of ways in which studios, big and small, you know, AAA and otherwise, are thinking about, you know, generative AI tools in games. Some of that is like being sort of top-down mandated in some places, and, you know, teams aren't taking to it, right? Like, you know, teams don't want to be using these tools that maybe they take over a part of what they want to do without it, right? In other cases, it's really helping people like do work faster, like I just said. As I use some of these tools myself sometimes, you know, just to experiment with, you know, one of the things that strikes me is like, oh, this is useful because, you know, as someone who's been a game designer for years, I still have like a perspective on design, and I know what like, you know, what works and what doesn't, and I have like a certain sort of aesthetic or taste or whatever. And, you know, these are skills that you need to sort of develop, right? So for students who might be, one of the things that's interesting is that we got to a place in accessibility of tools over years, like things like, picking up a game engine, picking up tools to make games have been, over the last 10 years, it's got easier and easier and easier. And now suddenly the conversation is like, oh, generative AI and vibe coding. There is still a sort of base level of skills you need to learn, right? That's what I'm trying to get at. And as we educate students in game design, so much of that is necessarily about thinking about, oh, how do you actually, do that organically? How do you learn all these kind of tools and skills, a lot of which is about communication and working with people and how you communicate ideas. So, we're sort of in this weird future where you simultaneously need to know all the things that you had to know previously. Also, in some cases, maybe need to know how to use some of these tools that may or may not stick around, who knows, that's a whole conversation. But then, need to kind of do all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the generative AI topic is tough because most of the games industry is against AI. And it's because we love making games and we love doing what we do. Why would we give it to a tool to do it? Let's facilitate our process. That would be better. I don't know if you all have ever seen that, it's not even a meme anymore, but it's so true. Somebody had said in a news article, I want AI to do my laundry so that I can write. I don't want it to write for me so that I can do laundry. It's that same exact process. If it could check for bugs quicker, amazing.
Yes.
If it could really facilitate our day-to-day process, amazing. But we don't need the tools to design or do all these things because that's exactly what we do and what we love.
Yeah, the details is the important part.
Yes.
Drawing, they're like, oh, we could skip to frame 24. You draw the first frame and the last frame, we could just draw everything between. It was drawing between is the part I like.
Exactly.
I think, and just to add, I think the key is for people who are starting off in the industry is it could feel really intimidating, and I think it feels intimidating for us in the industry, feels intimidating to everyone. But just don't get intimidated by it. Just remember that these are tools and we are working with technology and alongside technology. That is the nature of this industry. And so there have always been new tools that are going to be disruptors and disruptors and disruptors. And you just can't get distracted by that. Obviously, you want to be aware of what they are and how they can enhance your workflow and make you more appealing to hires. But the foundations of what you need to learn in order to really wrap your head around all of the departments that are integral in creating great games haven't changed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have maybe time for one more question as a panel, and then we can open up for Q&A for you all to ask us anything that you would like. So the last question that I will leave it on is, looking ahead, what excites you the most about the future of immersive games creation?
I think for me, it's just how many different kinds of stories are now being told, right? And what who is making games, who gets to make games, who gets to have a seat at the table. That's something that's already changed so much over the course of my own career, and I'm so grateful for that and thankful for that. It's also why I like being a game design educator as well, because I get to work with young people often and people who are coming in with with diverse backgrounds, with their stories to tell, and it's awesome being connected to that energy. So it gives me energy as a creator myself to keep going. So
I'm grateful for people online to complain about the things that they don't like, because right now, I'm making the game The Coldest Winter. We're featuring the first ever Dominican protagonist in a video game, right? That's insane. Games have been around for 40 years. There's never been a protagonist. You can search it up if you'd like, but I can tell you for sure there hasn't been. And it's wow, there hasn't been, and that I get to be the first one. I get to do that, but there's so many other cultures as well that just fall into that boat where it's never been explored. So many stories, so many elements, and nothing against the medieval times, but it's man, if I have to see another game set in that time period, it's just one of those things where now what I'm looking forward to is, because we're all connected, we all have different stories, and these tools are much more accessible, we're getting stories from all over the place, and I love that. We get to bring all sorts of narratives and different experiences to the forefront that have just never been seen. So I look forward to seeing what you guys can create. You know.
Awesome. What about you, Vasiliki? Anything else to add?
I think just to echo what everyone is saying, I mean, disrupting the power balance and the power dynamic and who gets to tell whose story. I think that's so important. And I think, what is telling stories through technology and this fourth industrialized revolution where our whole lives are mediated through technology. Like, what are we after? We're after looking at what the human condition is. Who are we? What are we? And how do we better understand and connect with each other? And I think there's and moving toward immersive or more sort of embodied experiences of engaging with stories. And I think it's super exciting. We're actually at a really, really exciting time.
I think, I know they were up at GDC last week, and I think there was a pretty mind-blowing presentation by the Claire Obscura team talking about how the majority of their combat systems were done entirely in blueprints.
Yes.
And so what we're seeing is the technical bar has started to flatten a bit, which is creating a little bit more of a linear entry for a lot of smaller teams to be able to create these experiences that used to, when we were talking about indie versus expenses and all of those things, engineering's expensive. It will always be expensive because we're competing with the Facebooks and the Googles and the companies that, are doing that, not just the creative teams. And so when you see a presentation like that, that should be super inspiring. And, there's people hard at work to continue to lower that bar, which only increases the ability for high fidelity immersive, I know we hate the word, immersive experiences for everybody to play and enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Unreal Engine, Blueprints is a visual scripting interface. So being able to script an entire game in that feels like a nightmare because you have to use the nodes that you have access to. So if you're not going in the back end in C++ and customizing things, it's just a little bit harder to be able to do things. So they really restricted themselves, but they were able to make an award-winning game, multi-award-winning game with that. Yeah, absolutely awesome.
Lot of awards.
Lots of awards.
A lot of them.
Yeah, I have my I have reservations. But all right, thank you all so much for your answers and for being vulnerable with us and sharing your thoughts on this industry and the work that we do. So now I'm going to open it up for Q&A for anybody to ask questions. Feel free to be as honest and as open as possible. We would love to answer anything that you may have.
Hello, my name's Gabriella. Technically, I go to CCNY, but I've been working in the industry for 2 years as a freelancer. I have a question for Justin. Is the marketing, advertising for Take-Two in-house or outside? And if it's outside, what agency do you guys work with?
So we have a lot of internal teams that do a lot of our marketing, from everything from social media to influencer. Obviously with the NBA franchise, that's something that's everywhere all the time. And so we do a lot of the internal work. We have some external partnerships, but the majority of the work, at least from the production side of getting things out and done, as well as the overarching strategy in terms of as it ties back to the IP itself, comes driven from our organization.
Are you guys hiring?
Great question.
I wouldn't be up on this stage if we weren't. I will be very candid. So yes, we tend to. The thing with us is, as things navigate, we're all over the U.S., right? We're in New York, Nevada. I sit in Carlsbad in the Zynga office, so we're really all over the place. But we are actively hiring right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Odessa, please. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Travis. I go by TV Sonic Gaming Online. I'm an independent games journalist and content creator. I'm just curious about you guys when it comes to being creatives in the space. How do you guys get over things like writer's block or being unmotivated to work on the thing you're currently working on? Thank you.
I feel that going outside is a really big help for me, getting away from games in general. Getting away from the media that you're trying to craft things in is going to be the best for getting inspired again. I think that a lot of mistakes that I see people is I play a lot of games, and they end up making derivative stuff because it's just that's the only thing they're exposed to. So I would suggest if you're gonna go out there and try to get out of your head and fight writer's block, is just do something else. Go rock climbing, just go swimming. And if you don't like to be that active, then, just, I don't know, watch a play or something. I don't know, but just do something that's not at all what you're normally doing.
Like, I encourage you, you don't have to just look at the games industry. Like, there's all of these like adjacent industries. Like, I work at a bunch of different creative labs attached to film festivals or like XR labs all around. And look, there could be, so like take your seedling idea and say, maybe I'll fill out this application. And just the process of filling out the application helps you think about it differently. And then maybe you go and then you get to like work with different people and borrow their brains. And so I think there's so many ways, like you're saying, to like jog this sort of creative process. And I think it's really important just to like not judge it. Like, don't like kill the bouncer. Like, the bouncer does not belong. Like, bad ideas good. Like, let them all flow.
You have no idea how therapeutic
Yeah.
it is to be around other people that perhaps are even also having writer's block or creative blocks, and then together you come up with solutions and talk about things together. I think that's super underestimated, just the power of being around other people and talking about the things that are in your head.
At the NYU Game Center, if you're working on a game, for years and years we've done an event called Playtest Thursday. So like anyone can bring a game that you're working on and like show it, get feedback. There's pizza. So yeah, that's just a great way to like unlock yourself if you are working on a game.
Hello.
Hi, my name's Feli, she, her. I've been working in the games industry for like about 4 or 5 years, and I'm a senior at the School of Visual Arts working on a vertical slice. My question is, generative AI is like the one up-and-coming topic, but I want to hear like what is your take on the ethics of that, because I think not just from where we're sourcing the content from, a very emergent thing that is coming to light is that the AI data centers are taking up lots of water, displacing people in underrepresented communities, and how do we as creatives like acknowledge that, and like is this a technology that we should really be using and that should be in the hands of all people?
What a great question. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Nikki.
I mean, I'll answer that because I was the one who was talking about AI originally, and yeah, it is interesting. As in the old days, like I'm someone who was like working in like games and AI when it was all about behavior trees and all of that stuff, right? So it's interesting getting into this sort of space. One thing I'll say is like, yes, absolutely. Anyone who like brings up ethical concerns about AI, you're absolutely right. Like these are things that are a concern. Transparently, I'm working on a game, like a personal game that uses an LLM, but I'm training and running that LLM locally as well. So like that's another thing to look at, right? Like you don't have to always tap into these like, massive models online. These are technologies that can exist in a way that is like more ethical and like, you're doing it offline, etc. So that's one answer. But yeah, no, I mean, I think, listen, anyone that says like, yeah, I just do not engage with this, for that reason is absolutely right. Also, for all the stuff I've said about like, generative AI LLMs, like I generally like to think about that in terms of text LLMs. I actually think there's a different conversation when it comes to image generation and video models and all of that stuff, which I actually kind of think those things like really need to be like, policed further and banned, etc. Right? So
Right,
yeah.
I think the severe lack of regulation is also what makes me scared, just as a creative, right? So I'm also indigenous, so I have a certain connection to the land that perhaps other people do not, and it worries me, right, that the UN put out a report that I don't know if anybody has read in January, where we said we're running out of fresh water on the planet. So by 2030 or something like that, where are we going to get drinkable, potable water when we're utilizing it to cool down data centers? Why aren't we using recycled water or seawater? There's so many things that we can do, but all those things are so expensive. It's like, but folks don't want to like figure out a solution. It's such a weird, I'm going to go on my soapbox here of like capitalism and imperialism and how much our world and our society is controlled by these things. And it is up to us to, as the people, decide what we want to choose to engage with and what we don't. So I think it cannot be one person, right? There's memes around going like, but I recycled my straw hat, my plastic straw. I'm using a metal straw and saving the world. It's like, it's not up to one individual, it's everybody collectively as a society to be able to combat these things. So I think if it's you personally that you want not to engage with AI, as I do, I think you are well within your right to do it. But like Me Too said, if you do run a local LLM where you're not using data centers and these unregulated things that are polluting the air and utilizing resources that are scarce because we have finite resources, then it is up to you to do that, right? And to encourage your circles and then have a domino effect on that usage. But I think 2.5 million users have stopped using ChatGPT recently because of like all these things that are happening. So people are becoming aware of what's going on. So we will see within the next 6 months to a year what ends up happening. But I don't think that it's becoming as fruitful as some shareholders and executives thought AI was going to be in a lot of these instances because it's just not there yet, right? But anyway, that's just my anti-AI soapbox.
Thank you.
Great. My name is Byron Jones. My name is Byron Jones. I am a CCNY student. What does a strong internship application look like for your team, especially for someone who is interested in game development?
I will likely answer that.
For you.
Yeah, so for us, what we look for is side projects is big, and then academic projects, right? So if you're on a team doing like a team-based game project, that's always super helpful. But really, it's the side project. If you're an engineer, what does your GitHub look like? Do you have a lot of entries? Are you doing a lot of things on there? If you're an artist, what does your portfolio look like? If you're a designer, do you have either games that you've prototyped or things that you can share? If you're animator, there's got to be reels of various things. Like one of my favorite interns we ever hired was someone who took a picture and then animated their cat, but they did it in like 2D and then 3D, and it was just like for fun, but that was a big part of because that's what the resources they had at the time. And they were using the brand new iPhone 3D scanning to try and like bring them in and do all that stuff. And it was, hey, here's what I can do, here's how to show it, and they showcased it, right? I think it's, as we talked about earlier, finding the many things you can do, finding one thing you really want to showcase yourself doing, condensing it, and putting that forth, right? Especially for an internship.
Yeah, and get lots of feedback on your resume as well, because honestly, and I say this from the perspective of, when I have like been in sort of hiring positions or hired people for my studio, people don't spend a lot of time looking at applications, right? Or like making, people make a quick snap judgment about, the sort of way that they think about you based on sort of the things they immediately see on your resume, right? So, just get a lot of feedback, iterate on it as you would do on anything else.
That's actually an extra good call out too, is reducing barriers to entry, right? I think on your resume. So if you have a portfolio, unlock it for that 1 week, right? The 1 week that you're applying to everything, unlock your portfolio. Because if you're having somebody click and then put a password in and all of these things, all these systems are just, they're the worst form of LLMs where they're just looking at stuff and hoping it's right when they import it. So really put the agency back in your hands and go, here's the link, here's the YouTube video, make it clickable and easy to find.
Can I suggest something else that has nothing to do with that, the applications or any of the process? I found that no matter how many times I've applied, how good my resume was, how many good things, and how awesome my portfolio was, I still wouldn't hear anything back. It just felt like I was throwing applications to a void. What I would truly suggest is being in the room with these people, finding mixers, finding like where they are in LinkedIn, finding events where they host and things like this, participating in that and just talking to them, just getting yourself, because honestly what really moves is like being connected. Yeah. Because the applications, they do make snap judgments. They're like, I can't pronounce this name. Let's go on. And I'm not trying to sound like mean about it, but I just see it happen so often that it's just like, you just got to get yourself in there. Be in front of them so they know how to pronounce your name. You know what I mean? Just like get in there and then they'll be like, oh yeah, I know this person. This person's cool. Let me go and bring them on for the interview. Like that is what I would really suggest, is like being great at networking. If you're not great at networking, just talk. communicate, right? You brought it earlier. Just figure out how to like advocate for yourself.
And just to add to what everyone's saying, also like we're sort of a different model than Take Two, obviously, as a small independent studio. And what we look for is like, what's that one sticky factor that feels like, oh, they connect, like their DNA connects to our DNA, and it's like a really concise, shortish email that's attached that really shows that you're listening as much as you're, can give input.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello, my name is Oret, and I am actually staff at the School of Visual Arts. My question is specifically for Evan.
Yes.
Yeah.
As someone who's also writing a Dominican protagonist, mine is a magical girl. How do you find the process of towing the line between educating the viewer versus becoming kind of preachy about it? And how difficult is it, since you're so close to that culture, not being too overdramatic about it, and just very like, here it is. This is cool and normal.
May I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you feel like you need to be preachy about it?
Because it feels as though to get anyone to care about anything relating to other cultures, you have to be very precise and very, bite-sized pieces about what you are presenting to them in order for them to be able to, stick around to learn more about said culture.
I would suggest is concentrating on the story you want to tell. It doesn't matter what they pull and what they don't pull from your experience. You're not representing the entire Dominican Republic. You are representing you and your experiences. What you have experienced as you is what's going to resonate with audiences. It's what's going to connect with people. And if you have things that are exclusive to being Dominican in there, people are going to be like, oh, that's cool, that's cool, it's that. But you don't have to speak for the entire country. You do your best to represent them, and people are going to be like, oh, well, that's not the way I do it. Well, I don't care how you do it. This is how I do it, So I would just recommend just being honest with yourself, having your voice, and doing that. Don't worry about, speaking for the entire culture, because you can't. You just can't. So, just find your voice, communicate that, be as honest as yourself as possible, and go with it.
Can I just add something to that, which is, there is this thought about, when you're any kind of minority and you're telling your story, who are you writing this for? Is it for the hegemonic audience, right? Or is it for other folks like you, right? Is it to connect to, the young child version of yourself who never saw yourself seen, right? That's maybe just a framing to hold in your head. You don't have to educate other people. You can just speak to yourself, right? Or other folks who you want to connect with.
Yeah, and just to add on what everyone's saying is there's an amazing Margaret Atwood quote where she's like, you can talk at people, but you could, shout from the rooftops down at people. But what you really want to do with your stories is invite them in and have them be curious. So how do you inspire that curiosity? And that's just have your artistic voice, but also recognize it's about storytelling, right? And story making with your audience.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Hello guys, how y'all doing?
Hello.
Stan Deasy, founder of SD52 Productions, film and TV, and all that good stuff. I'm a gamer, but not a gamer. My best friend is a gamer, which is currently not here. He knows all about this gaming thing. Me, I'm coming in as a business. Me coming in just to set everything together and to answer a question from all of you guys, because y'all guys are founders of your own game, right? So that's where I'm at with it. So we took a week or maybe 2 weeks. We set up everything, the labs, AI, all that kind of stuff, immersive. So we set up how Take-Two has Rockstar right under it. So we set up the whole channels like that with our gamer friends and everything. I don't know, they do. I'm just a business person. I'm I could tell you what to do, but you guys are smarter than me. So go get it so we could go up more. So where we at with it, we in the writing stage. How I could be able to you guys, or all of you guys individually, take this to a whole nother level in terms of me, because we set everything up, but I want to execute it. So can you guys assist me with that?
What do you mean by a whole nother level?
There's no black just to answer your question, there's no black narrative storylines, none at all.
Yeah.
So there's not somebody that's like, okay, that person. I mean, we see other games, but it's under like no offense, a white entity. There's no black. There's no black owned. We basically could create. That's like you create the first black owned Spanish owned Dominican owned system. We don't have that for blacks, so we want to be the first one that's gonna disrupt it too.
Then just
there's,
do it.
if there's one that's out there,
Then just do it.
we are.
Just go. Just like, I mean, I hate to just say, like, oh, just do that, but it honestly, like,
We doing it.
the
Yeah.
only way for things to be made and to be put out there creatively is to, like, sit down and start writing it. What is the story you want to tell? And it's like, if it's from, you know, a black creator, then that story's gonna be informed by, you know, by a black creator, you know, and if you're looking, you said you have all this system set up and all that stuff, like, well, now it's time to make the content. You're at the stage where you're just gonna make the content and concentrate on that. Concentrate on the narrative, concentrate on the dream, concentrate on what it is that you're trying to do. Now's the time to put pen to paper and go for it.
All right.
And the Black in Gaming community is well and thriving.
Yeah.
The Black in Gaming Foundation exists, and there's hundreds and maybe even thousands of Black game developers in the US and across the world who are building things together, and they have a community. So I would suggest definitely just look it up on Google, Black in Gaming Foundation, and then their Discord will pop up on their website. And it's a private Discord invite only because, again, they filter through people, and they should, to keep their spaces safe.
Absolutely.
But there's so many incredible. Ariel Knight is one of them out of Detroit, who has made tons of games on his own as solo dev, doing amazing work. The folks from South Africa, I don't know the studio, Kwap or something, they made the new looter game where you find African artifacts that were stolen, and then you gather them back to where they belong. There's so many amazing developers, and they're so easy to talk to.
Okay.
Just like Evan was saying, on LinkedIn, in the Discord, once you start knowing people's names and users, just sending them the DM, everybody's super open to having conversations about, hey, I'm trying to make this game, I made an entity, do you have any guidance or advice for me to like move forward? And everybody's super open to that, because we're community, right? Like when one of us succeeds, then the rest of us succeed.
Yeah,
so we want to see that more. So I would say definitely reach out to that community. And like Evan said, execute, right? So if you have an idea, you don't know a story, write that story. If you need somebody to proofread it, find some writers out there. Again, community. Hey, I'm looking for Black writers to take a look at my script. I need feedback. I need to make sure that I'm on the right path. Please give me that. And people are open to that when you have stuff. What we hate is for somebody to be like, here's my idea, make it. Like, we're not up for that. You know, you pay me, absolutely,
Right.
but none of us are working for free, especially people of color. Like, we're already
Right.
getting stifled. So at the end of the day, when it's collaboration like that, when we said, here, I put in the work, please help me out and let me know where to go, we love that, and we encourage that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
and don't get bogged down with like building out this system or this big studio or this like, you know, it's like it's all about the creative. If in fact you want to develop games, if you want to develop like a publishing company and you want to bring in other titles and figure out that is a system, that's a different model. But otherwise, and like don't be afraid to like reach out to professionals and make sure that you're bringing in, you know, best in class as collaborators who are really going to bring some flex.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Logan Belcher. I'm a senior at St. John's University studying game design. My question kind of pertains to that. As a senior, I'm graduating. I'm going to have to enter the workforce, and it's a very daunting experience. I'm just kind of wondering, you know, as someone who's a college student trying to get into this workforce that like a ton of adults way older than me and have much more experience than me are already like trying to get the same positions. I'm just wondering if you guys have any advice for someone like me to like stand out against people who have much more experience than me.
I'll take this one. So, okay, I got laid off in 2024, okay? Y'all know about the layoffs in the games industry. I think at this point, 40,000 people have lost their jobs in the last couple of years. Big names, we're talking about Arcane, Monolith, big studios, award-winning games, shut down overnight, right? So the industry is tough right now. You cannot compete with a Bungie developer who's been doing this for 17 years and has Destiny, The Last of Us, and all these games under their belt. There's no way to compete, but you don't have to compete. What you have to do is get good at what you love to do, and that's what's gonna make you excel. So I am not a big fan of volunteer work studios because I do think everybody should get paid for their work. But as a student, somebody who's coming in, Cave Bear Games is the one studio who built this partnership program with studios all over the world where they get volunteer developers on their teams. What that gives you is some experience, unpaid, but you can partner up with all of these. I think there's 150 studios under that partnership program. You can take a look and see what game they're working on, and if it's something that you like, talk to them. Hey, could I come volunteer as what do you do? A game designer?
Yeah, I'm mostly like story level design.
Okay, so then you come in, hey, I would love to get experience in narrative design, or I would love to get experience in level design. Do you have a spot where I can come and learn and grow? And most of the time they say yes, because they're all doing the same thing. So that's something that I would suggest. Another thing would be getting involved in game jams. itch.io/jams, best place, because they're online and they happen all the time, and you can meet people. It's great. And that way you can start building for your portfolio. But I would say don't for a minute think that you have to compete with somebody who's like, you've been doing this for 20 years, because it's not comparable. What you want to do is get your foot in the door. That's key. So that is working out your portfolio, building on your skill set, and then looking for associate and junior roles, which are really hard to come by, I'm not going to lie. And the reason why that is because when you have a game project and you have 10, 20, 50 million, and then you go up to a studio that's $200, $300 million project, if you were a creative director, would you hire a junior that doesn't know what they're doing? Probably not, right? You would want somebody that knows what they're doing and can get their foot on the ground in engine and just do the work to get us to the next level. That's why there's not a lot of junior and associate positions as much. And if they do come, it's towards like middle end of the project when they already have everything that they need and they just need content. And you can easily pop in content. I don't have to teach you the rules of level design. I'll just say, hey, we need to put this level design together. So I would say that definitely Cave Bear Games. Check them out and all the Discords associated. But just work on your craft. Don't worry about the folks that are looking for a job that have a mortgage to pay and have kids and all these other responsibilities. Like, they're in need too. So just think about like your end goal in your career and not compare yourself to those folks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, hello. My name is Thomas. I'm from New Zealand. I'm a recent graduate of my master's, and I did a thesis on evaluating Division OS for Indigenous storytelling. And so I'm pretty curious about that space in regards to like, have you worked on much like Indigenous projects and how you see this technology creating cultural value and bringing out the sustainability values embedded in these stories that can help better the community and the earth.
Heck yeah, kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. I went to Aotearoa 2 summers ago.
Shit.
But does anybody want to answer? Because I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Fellow Indigenous dev.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we do have a small community, by the way, the Indigenous Game Developers Association. We exist. So if you catch me, I can send you the link to that. So Indigenous stories are wonderful, and because our elders are passing away, it is up to us to figure out how we're going to preserve our stories, right? So with my Maori friends, we're talking about preserving language, right? So figuring out, can we use games so that we can have te reo inside games, and I can have my language, Hiwataia, in our games, and be able to spread it out all over the world, right? Even though people may not read it or know how to read it and engage with it, it exists, right? So I think there's a powerful opportunity for games to be able to preserve that culture, because literally our grandparents are passing, and with them goes a lot of oral knowledge, recipes and food. There's so many things that go away when they pass. So if we can try to figure that out together, then maybe we can build something for each other. I think the biggest issue that we have seen is sovereignty of our culture, sovereignty of our data. So people will willy-nilly just be like, I'm making a game where I'm going to put a Maori chief in it, and they're going to have all of these things, and they'll do the same thing with Taino, and like they'll put like war paint that is not the right war paint from our tribe, and then you start treading those lines of authenticity versus just costume, right? So I think that's one of the things that we're working with is how can we as Indigenous devs have data sovereignty over our stuff, not to give us permission, right? Because I can't give permission to anybody to utilize my Taino culture, right? And neither could you with your Maori culture. You can't say, come to me and ask me for permission to put stuff in your games. But we're trying to figure out is there an opportunity to build a council? But our elders have to get involved. And we know like how grandparents and like aunts and aunties are, they're like, I don't know about technology if I want to get involved with that. So it's a hard conversation to have because there's a lot of butting heads. But I would say join our community and we're trying to solve that stuff together in an Indigenous summit that we're trying to build for next year in Hawaii with our Kanaka from Hawaii because they are interested in this as well. So this is a global cause.
Yep, awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Aaron Plunkett. I am a senior at Pratt Institute in the Game Arts program. I'm currently working on my senior thesis, which we have already posted on Steam. Can I say the thing? Can I say the thing? Wishlist Dwam on Steam. It is currently the only video game on Steam, and I think pretty much all of the internet, because we searched, named Dwam. And I also
How do you
think
spell
that's
it?
pretty cool.
Yeah, how do you spell it?
DWALM.
Okay.
And it means a stupor or daydream.
Okay.
My question for you is, talking about flow and immersion like before, while it is good to keep the player immersed in the game and flowing to keep them playing and lost in it, how do you handle things that break the aspect of flow, and how do you most quickly and smoothly return the player back to that state of flow when things break? Because there's stuff like a UI or you know, certain dialogue that may feel off and that will just like break them out of it.
Would you like to answer?
I guess, I mean, it depends. Again, it's really hard to answer because it depends on the condition and the sort of state of flow. Like, you know, different genres sort of have different flow rhythms and what brings you in and out, and how you use sort of narrative devices to pull someone back in. It's like, you know, so maybe like if it's kind of like you do something that disrupts, it's kind of like editing, juxtaposition, like how do you do something that immediately brings them back in? How do you surprise them and so they're sort of caught off guard instead of like having a disruption in the flow and then it just kind of returns to base. So I think a lot of it is in pacing, a lot of it is in how do you skin the UI to feel of that world or on purpose not of that world. So I don't know, and I think it's just about beta testing too, and like bringing in your friends and saying like, oh, was that actually disruptive, or was it okay that it was disruptive? Yeah, I think it's just the process of creative development of trial and error.
Testing.
Absolutely.
Testing
Yeah.
a lot. Just watching people test, you just like bring people in a room and find out why it breaks. Find out if you're aware of the flow break, then it's like, okay, well, cool. How do I change that? But yeah, just going through testing and figuring out why it happens and how often it happens and whatnot. Basically, everything she said right there.
Or if they're missing the achievement, right? Like that happens, you see in a lot of games where you go from, okay, I'm learning how to run on the wall. Now I'm learning how to do this. Now I'm learning how to do this. Oh, and then the very next level, you have to string it all together, right? So you can break flow by introducing the string it all together piece too early, right? And so that'll happen. And so what they'll do is they'll scoot that further down the pipe and they go, wait, we haven't taught the player any of these things. So let's go back and let's teach them the pieces and then let them create, you know, it's like watching someone who's okay at Super Mario and someone who's like amazing at Super Mario.
Yeah.
Like very simple example, but you can see the difference. Someone knows everything to bounce off of, exactly where to jump, all of those things, because they've either learned it or they've taught themselves the ways to string it together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely an art form, I think, that you learn from failing all the time. Like, that's what it is. Like, how do you become a good designer and know how to make good decisions? You fail a lot until you figure out exactly what not to do so that you can avoid those things. And yet still you need to fix things, right? So UX design is something that kind of gets like thrown out the window a lot in games, but it's one of the most critical forms of design as part of the process. So I would say if you're interested in that and figuring out how to align and adjust, there's a great book called The Gamer's Brain by Celia Hodent. She's an incredible UX designer. And there's a lot of tidbits about the psychology of players to be able to do tutorialization properly, pace things properly, expose information and communicate information properly. All of that matters in games, but we tend not to think about it because they're like, we're just making a game, it's gonna be fun. But those tidbits are really important because the game that you're making is not for you, it's for other people. So how are other people gonna react and understand the things that you brought together? That's the important bit in what makes a game successful versus what makes a game not successful.
That's amazing. And just to add one more thing, like also look at another game that's similar to your game and how did they do it without disrupting flow.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, last question. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Reina. I work in digital content and engagement for Carnegie Hall, so very different industries. But my question is, I'm interested in production as a discipline. And as Evan mentioned earlier, it's a job that requires a lot of soft skills and communication. And I was wondering, it's like unlike other disciplines like art or like technical skills, it's hard to showcase that kind of work. So I was wondering what you would like to see in like a producer's portfolio or how to best like showcase your work in that way.
Spreadsheets. Spreadsheets. Like, I mean, honestly, I just had a conversation about this like a few weeks ago. People were like asking me about like being a producer and like what do you need to do that, and being able to communicate the ability to just like, oh yeah, I started with this and I organized it this way and then I distributed it this way. And then seeing the progress and measuring that like progress of like what has changed since your involvement in there, and being able to document to the T like what your involvement in this project changed. So just having a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of documentation, and be like, yeah, cool, this is what I did and this is how I organized it. And a lot of people will appreciate that. And it's very difficult to, to be able to tell people, oh yeah, I did this and I was responsible for this, and this, and they're like, well, you didn't make anything. Well, it's like I made it happen. So, so like, yeah, it's gonna be important to like document it.
I think that, with production specifically, like producers are super important. I think, there's like the most prevalent form of like production methodology in games is some form of agile, and different studios have like a different version of it they take on. So, I think like educate yourself on like agile, understand the language, and, what all the different terms mean. You can even like get certified in that if you also wanted to, which is just, especially as you're coming from somewhere, from a background of like having a career. I think, if I were to look at your resume and you've done a bunch of stuff and then you like, you have some project management and then you also have like a Scrum certification, I'd be like, oh yeah, you probably know what you're doing, right? So, but yeah, the other thing you could do as well is, the biggest thing is like showing experience. So maybe like finding a small indie team where like you can go and like learn in practice that sort of, that agile methodology, and like helping them with that, and taking them through that. So I think that's another approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I would add too that this is something that you can exercise as well on your own, in the same way that we do with making games when we prototype. You can prototype a project. And you can say, hey, I'm going to make a pretend project that is going to launch in 6 months. What would the team theoretically need to do within the 6 months, and what would be my job in ensuring that on that day, 6 months from now, that project gets released? So we would start talking about burn down charts, if that's something that you haven't been exposed to, being like, okay, we have 15 team members. This person's putting in 8 hours every day, every week. This person's only doing part-time. And then you can kind of start exercising what it looks like for people to do their work and seeing if they can meet that deadline. Another thing that you can practice is road mapping. So if there's something, again, like a 6-month period project, road mapping what month 1 looks like, month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6, and doing a roadmap from there. All these are super useful skill sets. So if I know, looking at your resume, that you know how to do those things and you put them into practice, that's like a great showcase of your knowledge.
Yeah, and maybe even in whatever cover letter, something, identifying like the pain points that you've seen and how you kind of imagine to like overcome them better.
Cool. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, folks, so thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you. Some of us will linger around, so if you have questions, will be outside. I think Me Too is the only one that needs to run and take care of her baby.
Yeah, I have a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old. So.
Yes, so, but the rest of us will be out here to chat with you all. Thank you so much.